music do we have going on?
You can pick whatever you want.
What do like 13-year-old girls listen to? Put that on.
Oh God.
I don't know, bro.
Hey Cannon, what does your daughter listen to? She listens to like...
All right, we are live. We're getting people in.
The pregame.
Pre-game, warm up, guys. Warm up for all your questions. Limber up. All right. We are live, I think, right?
We are live.
So we're going to be talking about a couple of things today. We're going to be talking about comic book collecting, which is something that I've been doing since I was 12. We're going to be talking about my second appearance in a comic book, technically. By the incomparable Jim Lee, and he'll actually be joining us a little bit later for some questions and answers himself. So, third thing we're going to be talking about today is my original comic book series, Ascencia. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to field questions. We're going to talk about some books that I love, and that's how we're going to do it. Kind of impromptu, you know, no script. You have any questions yet?
No questions yet. Everybody's saying hey. Everybody's saying hi. And...
Hey. So this is actually the comic book that I first appeared in, or sorry, second appearance. Donnie Cates is responsible for my first appearance. And it is Detective Comics 1000, came out, what, about a year ago now, Cannon?
Mm-hmm, about a year.
Approximately. And this is a Jim Lee variant cover that we had as an exclusive here at Torpedo Comics. This is actually the original art. Jim was nice enough to give it to me as a gift. And this is my first appearance as this character who is basically, I guess you could say like a pawn shop owner, but he sells items that were either used by villains or heroes and discarded. So in this particular story, which is a really cool concept, Bruce Wayne goes in under an assumed identity and buys the gun that was responsible for the death of his parents. And he takes this gun, and I'll show you the interior. It's really cool.
We do have a question. What was the inspiration behind your comic book?
I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So let's get to this story here. So here it is in full color, guys. That's the same page that we just showed you a few seconds ago. And as you go through the story, it's a short story. And here's me again, according to my wife, a much better version of me, but we're working on it, you know. Anyway, as they go through the story, they explain, you know, where some of the weapons came from, what battles, etc. And then what ends up happening is he buys the weapon and he overpays for it, which is great because I love getting overpaid whenever possible. And he takes it back to the Batcave. And he's discussing things with Alfred. And then what he does is he actually melts down the weapon that represents such a horrible but defining part of his life. And then he actually creates almost like an armor version of his insignia that he puts over his heart. So that negative becomes a positive. It's really clever writing on the part of, who wrote that?
I'm not sure who wrote that one. There was a lot of writers. So
there were a lot of writers in that book, but really clever. This is basically a color proof. Alex Sinclair, who is Jim's colorist for the most part, and a very good guy, gave me this as a gift. It's one of one. I just thought I would show that because it's just a really cool thing to have, and I want to thank Alex for it, of course. All right, so now we can field some questions.
All right. Mainly it was what was the inspiration behind your comic.
Okay.
And
any other questions about this or?
Not yet.
All right, then why don't we're going to approach the inspiration about my comic at the latter part of this. Let's talk about some books that I've always enjoyed. So this is Incredible Hulk, issue number 181. It has the first full appearance of a character I love, Wolverine. Some people say I kind of look like Wolverine because we're both kind of shorter and, well, generally speaking, hairy and stocky. So Plus I have claws. But anyway, this is the first appearance. This is a 9/8 copy, valued at right around $40,000. And this is a book that, as a kid, I always wanted to have but couldn't afford, because every time I had the money to buy it, when it was $50, and I finally raised $50, then it was $100, so on and so forth. So I chased it for a long time, and then eventually, you know, through the years, I've been able to buy, you know, probably a couple hundred copies of it and sell a couple of hundred copies over the years. But it's an incredible book, great story, really cool cover actually for the time. You know, who's the cover? Trim?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great cover. This is a 9/8 copy, like I said, but you don't have to have $40,000 to enjoy this. You can find plenty of reprints and low-grade copies that are affordable, and we can actually help you with that here at Torpedo Comics.
We have a question. What is your favorite age of comics?
That's a good question. I started buying comics when I was around 12, so that's the early to mid 80s. And I love the comics that came out then, but then I started going back and reading older books. And I discovered that I loved everything from the 60s, 70s, and 80s up to that point. But I really gravitated towards the backstories and Journey into Mystery, where, you know, it was about Thor, but he was in Asgard. I loved that storytelling. It was Thor as a young man, you know, full of vigor, attacking interesting mythical creatures, and I just enjoyed that era. But I would say my favorite era was probably the 80s, because you had stuff coming out like Watchmen, you had Dark Knight, you had Spider-Man. McFarlane came out in the 80s, so
It was a very big transition.
Yeah, all his innovations that he did with Spider-Man, and of course you had the Jim Lee era of X-Men, which is my favorite era of X-Men. Notwithstanding the Claremont era, I love that era too. There's a lot of good eras.
John, how many comics do you have now?
Well, because I own a comic book store, or several of them, and we have an online presence as well, you could say that I have millions and millions of comics. But in my personal collection, there's probably less than 20 or 30 comics. I'm more of a collector of comic art now. We'll show you a couple of pieces here at the store.
You guys have seen for any of our regular guys?
Yeah, a lot
All
of people
the
have seen them already.
Beautiful art.
So I'm a huge Richard Corbin fan, and this is a original cover from Richard Corbin. Came out in 1972, which is coincidentally the year I was born, and that was Fanagore #4, which is an underground comic book. Most people don't know what that is, but if anybody has ever heard of Heavy Metal magazine, he was really prominent in Heavy Metal magazine, especially in the 70s and 80s. And I think he created a character called Den, who I believe this was the original version of Den, who was later in the Heavy Metal movie. And if you go up just a little bit, we were talking about McFarlane earlier, and that is actually the original cover art for Amazing Spider-Man 299 by Todd McFarlane. Really cool story about that. When I showed that to Todd at Comic-Con about a year ago, he turned it around and said, look, this is going to make you feel bad but good at the same time. And he showed me his original price on it, which was $350. I obviously paid a lot more than $350 for it, but we had a good laugh about it. Todd's a very nice guy, and we hope to have him here at Torpedo one of these days. Then you can go up again. There's a wonderful piece by Frank Cho, and just tons of great art as you peruse and go down the line. I've got modern stuff. I got stuff from the 70s, 60s. There's a beautiful Adi Granoff piece right there, Galactus, which I bought the second I saw it, and he's a good friend of the store as well. And then you have everybody from Bill Sienkiewicz to Mark Brooks up there, a great X-Men piece that I picked up from him, and so on and so forth. Let's head back.
Some people are asking, will you do a meet and greet after the virus? Is Ascencia available for pre-order? So there's a lot of questions on.
These are all good questions, and we're going to address a lot of the Ascencia stuff after we get Jim Lee on. Then we'll broach the subject of Ascencia and get into that a little bit.
Then we had a question, do you sell the art?
If I can avoid selling it, I don't sell it, but of course, like everything else, we're just caretakers. We enjoy it for a period of time, and then what you're supposed to do with stuff is it's supposed to go on to the next home for that person to enjoy. So about every 10 years or so, I like to sell a lot of the art that I bought 10 years prior, because I buy art almost every year. And that's just kind of like a personal thing. There's other collectors who, you know, their dying breath, they still have the art in their hands, and after they're gone, then maybe it goes out to somebody else. But I just have a little bit of a different philosophy on that, and it's really about, hey, if I have it, I look at it. That Fanagor, I'll look at it every day. That I see it and I enjoy it. But there's probably somebody else that enjoys it as much as me. So if the right offer came along, I would definitely sell it.
Are there any horror comics you like?
I love the ECs. Of course, I'm a massive Bernie Wrightson fan, his Frankenstein stuff. So yeah, I do like horror comics, especially ECs.
And do you have a current title that you're reading now, or are you still reading?
That's a good question. Since nothing's coming out right now, it's tough to read anything. I wouldn't say there's anything that I'm reading that comes to mind, although there's a lot of good product out there. I became a little disenfranchised with comics about 10 years ago, as far as the new stuff coming out, because they were going a little too woke for my taste, and they took away a lot of the love I had for the characters. For example, you had the Avengers in the theater, you had Iron Man, you had all these great Marvel comics, but then when you went to your local comic book store at the time, you couldn't find those characters in the comic books. Iron Man was like a 15-year-old girl, Thor was a Jane Foster. I just couldn't associate with it. So a lot of my love for comics at that point was more about the older stuff. Now, recently there's been a lot of changes. Both DC and Marvel have been doing more things in continuity, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm open to suggestions, but thus far I just haven't had the time to sit there and really devote the energy to reading 100 or 200 titles a month, which is what it takes for me to be invested in it. I'm not a casual guy. I don't do things casually. So if I'm going to get into reading new comics, I'm going to have to read them all. That's just part of my mental illness, I guess.
We have just a bunch of questions, some about the business, some about how did you meet Steve?
Limey Steve?
Yep.
Okay, so Steve and I have been friends for about 30 years. We used to sell at conventions as competitors, and we used to both set up at a place called Frank & Sons Warehouse, which is in the City of Industry, which was basically a big warehouse, kind of like a swap meet, where they would sell, comics, collectibles, baseball cards, and also supplies. And it was just basically like 20 or 30 different dealers in each genre, and we would set up and we would sell as if it was a convention, but it was twice a week. So Steve was a competitor, and I used to sell him books, and eventually, you become friendly with the people that are in the same business as you are, and we became friendly. And then there came a point where I left and started touring. But then I would come back from time to time saying hello and, rekindle those relationships. And Steve was one of the guys that I always had a great time with and a great association with. And what eventually happened is he had a partner, it wasn't working out. He left, and he actually called me and said, "John, you need me. I'm ready to work for you." And I said, "Well, I don't know if I need somebody, but if I ever do, you'll be the first person I call." About 6 months later, I called him, and he's been working for me ever since, and just a fantastic person, great human being. Also, incredibly well-versed in comics, way more knowledgeable than I am. The guy's an Overstreet advisor, well-deserved, who probably puts more effort into advising for the Overstreet than all the other advisors combined. Just spends countless hours of his free time on it. I would say he's somewhat obsessed, and I can't say enough good things about him. But that's how we met, and we've had a very close relationship. We've got about 20 employees here at Torpedo Comics. I don't consider any of them as employees. They're all friends. I care about them. They care about me. And we all care about this business. So that's just, again, it's about philosophy. I trust them when I'm not around to run it well.
Of course, people wanting to see Torpedo on the East Coast. And
well, you may get your wish one day. Right now, we're focused on making an even bigger and better Torpedo Comics store here in Las Vegas, which will be the benchmark for anything we do going forward. My philosophy was always about doing something better, not more of, but better. I'd rather have the most incredible comic book store than have 50 mediocre ones. And I know financially that's not necessarily the best business plan, but you don't do everything for financial reasons. Sometimes it's more about making something that's unique and an experience for people. and sharing your passion with people. You know, and we do very well thanks to our strong following and loyal customer base, and we're happy about that. So, will I be in the East Coast? Well, the rents are ridiculous in New York, so it's tough. But hey, you never know. I might do it if the right opportunity comes up.
And then some people just saying, thank you for being so active during this time. Keeps some of us from going insane.
Well, you know, we have a lot of plans to be even more active, and look, we're all in this together. This is a difficult time, but if you put them in perspective with the times that our ancestors had, we got it pretty easy. Yes, it's terrible that people are dying from this. I think a lot of it is overblown, but hey, you know, what do I know? I'm just a musician and comic book store owner. But with that being said, World War II, could you imagine how difficult it was for people to live through that time? They didn't know what was going to happen. People were being killed by the tens of millions, you know, so it's relatively easy what we're going through. Yeah, we have to be home, but take that opportunity to spend time with your family, spend time with your loved ones, you know, clean up the house, do the projects that you never seem to have time to do, maybe take some risks artistically. Of course, we want this to be over as quickly as possible because not everybody has the financial means to survive it. So that's the responsibility of our government. That's why we put you in the position of being in government. It's your responsibility to get this economy back rolling. And I'm hoping that the partisanship can end and that people can come together and work towards a single goal of making the United States as strong as possible. And that's ultimately what they should be concentrating on.
We have a couple good questions here. Is there a comic currently in your shop, not in your shop, that you're chasing? I mean, we get a lot of big books, so it's that list has got to be pretty small.
We've had a couple. There's nothing I'm chasing. I'm just chasing everything, really. We buy collections. By the way, we constantly buy. We're buying right now. So if anybody has a collection to sell, contact us at sales@torpedocomics.com. But I guess Marvel 1 is my favorite comic book. So any Marvel 1s out there, send them my way.
As a collector, not a seller, do you have any advice for getting into books that will hold their value over time? Like, how do you choose, you know, when you look at that?
If you're looking strictly at the investment angle of comics, which, by the way, are one of the best investments you can make, I think they outperform most stocks. And the bottom line is you actually have something, you own it, you take it home, you can look at it. And the bottom line is, if you want a first appearance of all the new X-Men, you know, Giant Size X-Men #1, there's a finite amount of them, you know, and there's more and more people entering the hobby on a consistent basis. So if you want this book, there's going to be competition for it. And if you own this book, there's going to be competition to buy it. And that's not going to change. It's going to be more and more expensive. You know, this 9.6 copy, when I was a kid, I could probably get it for $20. Now it's in the $7,000 range. So, you know, it is a great investment. What I would recommend, if you are looking to invest, first of all, we can help you with that, by the way. Just email us. Whatever your budget is, if you're not looking at it strictly for reading and collecting and completing, and strictly for investing, whatever your budget is per month or per year, take that budget and buy the book that you can afford at the max of that budget. You know, rather than having hundreds of books that are mediocre, have one that is exceptional. And that book is going to accrue more value over time than the 100 or 200 that are mediocre. That's a simple collecting advice that I can give you. In the long run, you can do much better. If you buy from Torpedo, we have 100% buyback guarantee, so you can never lose money. So if there is something that you want to invest in, feel free to contact.
If you could write for only one character, who would it be?
Dr. Doom. My favorite character of all time. So I think I've said that before, but I love him because, and if you ever read Emperor Doom, which is a really cool graphic novel by Marvel Comics, came out in like 87, 86, something like that.
Yeah.
He actually gets power. You know, he finds a way utilizing the Purple Man, which is a character from Daredevil, and he gets mastery over the entire planet, and then he realizes, you know, how much of a burden that is, and you know, you have to figure out small disputes, and it just takes up so much time, and he actually gave up the power. So it was a good lesson. It's like, be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you get it and it sucks, you know? So anyway, that's my favorite.
Okay, so
We should have Jim Lee chiming in about 2 minutes. He's very punctual, so.
all right, no other questions at the moment. See that nice giant size there.
Yes. I'm going to show you another book that I love. This is Amazing Fantasy 15. It's a 1.0. This trades at around, right around $9,000 to $10,000. It's the first appearance of Spider-Man. And this book, along with Fantastic Four 1, invigorated and saved Marvel Comics, which at that time was being distributed by none other than DC Comics. They had limited distribution. I think it was like 12 to 18 books a month. And they were dying, you know. For whatever reason, people weren't interested in Marvel Comics. And basically they said to Stan Lee, Stan, just do whatever you want to do with this title. We're going to cancel it anyway. And him and Ditko and Jack Kirby combined to create Spider-Man. There was actually a Ditko cover, Steve Ditko cover, that was really good. They didn't end up using, so they had Jack Kirby do this. I always thought this was Ditko growing up, but because Ditko was responsible for Spider-Man in a lot of ways. But and back then, by the way, guys, it's not like they had instant knowledge of what sold. It would take months for the publishers to find out what sold. So the way it would work is books were sent out in bundles to newsstands all across the country. The newsstands would sell them for a certain period of time. You'll see on a lot of books date stamps. You don't see it on this one. But back then they used to date stamp the book on the cover. And that way they would know when it came in and then when to take it off the shelf. And a couple months later, you know, whatever they didn't sell, they would return to the publishers and they would get, you know, going forward.
Jim is on.
What's up, Jim? Welcome.
He's coming. I just said accept, so
okay.
I don't know if it's...
It'll take a second.
Oh, there we go.
What's up, Jim?
Hey, John.
What's up, Jim? Welcome. He's coming. All right.
Good job of getting in shape, dude. You look great.
Oh, thanks, man. You know, I've been lifting a lot of boxes over here, helping the guys out. So losing some weight. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, man.
So I want to talk a little bit. We'll go back to Detective 1000. This cover, of course, is by Jim Lee, who we have right there. And Jim, what motivated you to put me in a book? Keep it PG, Jim. PG.
I need someone that looked like they could run a pawn shop.
Thank you.
And so I immediately thought, no, I didn't immediately think of you, but I know you like to bargain and negotiate. I've seen you do it live in person, so I just thought of that kind of personality, and I said, well, I'll just draw John. He'll get a kick out of it.
Jim's being very nice right now. I know what he really wants to say. It's a lot more interesting, but you know, he's in corporate America, so he's got to be careful. I don't have to be as careful, but Jim, give me an idea of what's going on right now in the industry. You know, where are we going? What are as a comic book store owner?
Yeah.
Of course, we're very appreciative of what you're doing right now.
Right.
Jim, by the way, for those of you who don't know, he's doing a piece every day. It probably takes him 3 or 4 hours to do each piece, and he's putting them up on eBay for auction. And 100% of the proceeds are going to go to help comic book stores across the country, which is amazing. A lot of these places are mom and pops. They're having a very difficult time right now because there's actually no distribution happening as of April 1st for new books. So they've got nothing to sell. Yeah. And so they're not allowed to be in business anyway.
Yeah. So there's several things that are happening. The fundraising piece of it, DC put up $250,000. I think we're going to hit like probably 400, 500,000, hopefully a little bit more with the sketches I'm doing. But then I've also had other artists, you know, like Jeff Scott Campbell, Ivan Rice,
Art Adams,
Brian Hitch, Art Adams, Doug Mankey, Frank Miller. So they're all contributing art, and then we're also auctioning off all those pieces. So that's going to raise a ton of money as well. So we're doing it all through this nonprofit called BINC. It's the Book Industry Charitable Fund. If you just Google that, if you're a store owner and need help with payroll or bills or something like that, they've got a portal online, and the money that we're raising goes directly to the direct market brick and mortar stores. So, so that's a piece of it. The other piece of it is, we've broken out of the exclusive distribution model with Diamond. We've got a couple other regional distributors that we're working with. The idea is to build redundancies and have systems that help overlap, so that as this pandemic kind of rolls through the country and different parts of the country kind of go dark, we'll have a means of getting comics product to the shops that are open. And I think, look, it's challenging exactly what that time period is. We're targeting end of April to get books out. And we realize it's not going to be every store, but we're also not putting out the full slate. We're not putting out Batman 92. We're putting out a bunch of small books to basically get the system up and running, to work out all the kinks. And once more stores are online, that's when we'll roll out the Death Metal and the Batman 92s. We want the biggest audiences. Those are our big tentpole comics. But right now we're releasing a lot of lower selling books to just basically get the system up and running. And, Diamond will be part of the equation going forward. And hopefully we'll have a healthier, more vibrant distribution system, having multiple distributors out there for stores to choose from.
Yeah, you can't get the train rolling at full speed right away. It's got to slowly build up steam. And I think that's what's going to end up happening with the economy. Yes, once everything is a go and we can safely do business again, which hopefully will be soon, you can't expect it to be at 100%. It will slowly build up. But if we all work together and don't work from a point of fear and don't live from a point of fear, then we'll be able to build our economy back up, get everybody back to work, get the unemployment rate back down to, as low as possible. We have historic lows in the last couple of years. So we just need to all focus on being safe. Yes, that's important, but also, not living in fear. And once we are allowed to go out, understand that our local governments aren't going to give us permission to do business again if they don't feel like it's safe enough to do so. And it's just a matter of supporting your local comic book stores as much as you can. As much as Torpedo appreciates, the gesture by you and by DC and all the creators and artists, we're not going to be taking advantage of that. We're still doing okay, and we have a huge support base, and so we're doing fine. But we appreciate it, and we're actually going to be doing some things to help local comic book stores here in Las Vegas stay afloat during this time. And this is a community. Even though we're in competition with each other, we have to work together to make sure that our industry that we love maintains.
I wanted to applaud you guys for what you're doing. Obviously, these live sales and things like that, you guys are definitely thinking outside the box. I would recommend packing food with like the picked up, the comics that I would love the idea of getting my comics and lunch, made for me.
Anything for you is food related, Jim. I noticed that about you.
Maybe a roll of
toilet food into everything.
A roll of toilet paper in there, and then maybe a roll of toilet paper in there with the pickup comics, and maybe like a random print or something every 10th pick. I don't know, man. I think what you're doing is the right
Jim
direction.
is going to do a personal sketch for every single person that buys anything from Torpedo Comics in the next 30 days. Thank you, Jim. That's very kind of you.
Fake news.
Had a question on how you two met.
Jim and I?
Yep.
Yeah.
Jim, you really want me to tell this story?
Christian Singles.
So, Jim was at a convention up in Oakland, used to be called WonderCon, when WonderCon was in the Oakland area. This is almost, 20 years ago. And I was set up there, and System of a Down was on our second album. I think Toxicity had come out at that point, or just come out. And I knew that Jim was signing. Tremendous Jim Lee fan all my life. Really had a lot of respect for his art, but didn't know him personally, of course. And there was a long line of people. And back then what I used to do is I used to take CDs with me, of our first two albums, and I would just give them out to people as gifts. People that I admired or people that that I had relationships with. So I went to Jim. There was a long line. I couldn't wait in line because I had my booth. I went to the front and I said, Jim, I don't want a signature or anything. I just wanted to give you my CDs. I'm a huge fan. And that was it, And then I said the band's name, and I said System of a Down, and It was like symptoms of a death. You know, he was making fun of me a little bit.
You know what?
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm completely honest. I hadn't heard the band, and I thought it was an unusual name. And at first I was confused. Like, what does that mean? Like Watership Down? Like, and so I started going. I started riffing off of it, just because I like to interact with the fans, and and I didn't know like what rock star waits in line, and I didn't realize he had. And that's what I didn't realize. I thought he waited. Like, so there were a lot of clues that basically said like, what is this? And I didn't know what to make of it until John walked away, and then the artists that were next to me, who were younger and hipper, were like, dude, that was System of a Down. Like, so like.
Well, Jim used my CD actually as a ruler.
Yeah. But before that, I was drawing
very
sketches for people, and I needed to draw a circle. So I was like, I have that CD that guy gave me, and I pulled it out and used it as a template.
Somebody sent that sketch in.
Yeah, I think they videotaped me using your CD as a template to draw a circle,
which is hilarious. And then, of course, later on, I went back to my booth. I was set up selling comics, and all of a sudden, Jim walks up with this entourage of the other artists that were with him as well, which was Carlos Deanda, Ollie Garza, and Lee Bermejo, who all became friends, after the fact. And they all came by my booth, and they were so nice. They brought me some prints, and Jim came and thanked me personally for the CDs, which were also rulers for him at that point. And then Jim invited me out they were going out to have some fun that night and have some food and do some dancing and stuff. And I don't dance, but I went anyway. Jim's a very good dancer. And we became friends ever since and developed a very, very strong bond. And I consider him one of my best friends, and I think it's likewise for him. And that's it. It was as simple as just a chance meeting and me not wanting to wait in line. Really, the line was like hours long. So,
and then when I went to Italy, I took 3 CDs with me, 3 physical CDs, and Toxicity was one of the 3. So, man, I listened to that CD. Oh, this was before.
You needed like rulers and stuff. So obviously,
exactly. So I could listen to it, the music, and create moons and planets. This was before iTunes, so I traveled super light, so I had these 3 CDs and I listened to them over and over again, and so I got super familiar with the work and but we bonded over comics and music and just hanging out and had a lot of adventures together. So yeah, that was
it was a chance meeting, but you know what, it was fortuitous because again, Jim is one of the nicest human beings I know, very charitable, but just you judge somebody when people aren't looking, and Jim is always the person that you want to be like and emulate. Just a quality guy. Thank you so much for being on this, Jim.
Same to you, John.
Just being a part of my life. And thank you for being in comics, man. We love you.
Man, we love you too, man. All right, good luck with the stream. All right, catch you. See ya. Peace out.
So, guys, we're gonna have a few minutes to talk about. My phone's messed up. We're gonna have a few minutes to talk about Ascencia. So this is the time where I will take some Ascencia questions. I think we already have one.
Yeah, what was the inspiration behind it?
So I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Armageddon. I love that movie. I watch it every time it's on TV. I was watching that movie, and that was part of the inspiration, but I think just being somebody that's always looking at like the possibilities, right? The possibilities. Like, what would happen if right now we have a global pandemic, but what happens if the food runs out? Right now everybody's still civil, we're working with each other, we're doing all these things, but the second the Jack in the Box stops serving food and there's no more food at Costco or Albertsons or wherever you shop for your food, what happens to society at that point? So I started thinking about like, okay, what if we knew that this giant meteor was coming towards the earth? What if we knew it was going to end all civilization? How would we react to that? And that kind of was the beginning of the thought process that led to the eventual orb that is the epicenter of this story. So what happens is this meteor that's supposed to hit Earth, for whatever reason, explodes into 1 billion pieces. And what was going to destroy our society and the planet and all life on the planet, what ends up happening is the remnants of that fall to the earth, and one of those pieces creates this crater. In the middle of the crater is this orb. And for whatever reason, there's qualities in this orb that make you younger. So depending on proximity. And the limit of the effect is the entire scope of the crater, right? Like that's created by this meteor lands. And society develops around that. And I guess the crux of the story is, what would you do if you were in a position to live there? What would you do to get there? You know, like all these things that we take for granted, or we think so highly of ourselves. Well, if you're put in these positions where it's life and death, who would you abandon? Who would you screw over to get there? And what would you do to stay there? You know, and it just asks questions about your own moral fiber. It makes everybody look in the mirror. And it, of course, it expands outside of that. There's real characters. There's people that are very good people. There's people that are very bad. And sometimes the people that are very good that you loved in the beginning of the storylines are people that you won't like so much later on, because you'll see some of their weaknesses and frailties, and that everybody makes mistakes, and that not everybody is good all the time as much as you want to be. And then the people that are bad, sometimes you think they're bad people, but really they're doing things based on what they think is best for everyone and trying to do something for everyone. Sometimes you look like a bad guy when you're doing that, you know? For example, when my kid and I walk into a store and she wants everything on the shelf, and I have to tell her, you can't have 14 pieces of chocolate. You know, in her eyes, I'm being bad. But in reality, I'm doing it for her own good, because she's going to get a stomachache from that chocolate later on in the day, and then be up all night crying. And, you know, you do things that are hard sometimes in life. So the story definitely is going to be interesting for people, because they're going to make them, it's going to make you look inwardly and really focus on what's important to you. You know, like there's been a cataclysmic event that takes place in my story, like about 75 years prior, that changes the landscape and changes the earth, and countries don't exist anymore in the way they exist now, and cities don't exist in the way they exist now, and supplies are short. You get rations, and you know, civilization is trying to rebuild. But then you have Ascencia, which is like, has everything and has the best technology, and you know, has no food shortages, and they're living the high life. And then you have other people who are having a very tough time and just trying to stay alive. So it's social, political, but you know, science fiction. It goes a lot of different places. Any other questions?
Yes, it's a lot of people are asking when it's going to be released. How are they going to get it?
So it was supposed to be released in April. Obviously, that didn't happen. Then I postponed it to July, but I'm not sure if July is going to happen. I will tell you that I have the first 6 issues completely written and the first 4 issues completely drawn. We have covers coming out from the greatest artists that exist, and we're going to continue to do that. For example, Ben Oliver is our primary cover artist, but we've got covers from Simon Bisley, Jay Lee, Frank Cho is producing one for us. Jim Lee promised me one 2 months ago. Should be here any day now. And we're approaching good friends like Sienkiewicz, Mark Brooks, Adi Granoff, Art Adams, and you will slowly but surely see covers coming out from a lot of the people that we've had here at Torpedo Comics over the years. And, you know, I'm using my relationships to get just some of the top notch artists in the world. And I'll tell you, some of the covers that I've already seen are incredible. But I'm also going into Instagram and other venues and finding little known artists, people that are really exceptional, but maybe don't have that following, or maybe are not even in the comic book world. So if you're an artist and you think you have something to offer, you know, feel free to send me direct messages at John Dolmayan on Instagram. And I'm looking for talent wherever I can find it. We're going to do a lot of variant covers. As far as when and where you'll be able to get it, if this continues on, I'm going to make it just direct from our website, torpedocomics.com. And I'll probably offer like the first 3 issues at one time, and then we'll go from there. And I hope people enjoy it. I'll tell you, I've had a great time creating it, and I have a lot of plans for it. There's probably 12 to 15 years of storylines that I have in mind already.
Somebody's asking if you can tell us anything about any of the characters that start out.
Sure. I'll tell you about the main character. He is from a city called Bethany, which is a sister city of Ascencia. It kind of resembles like the favelas in Brazil. You know, it's destitute, low technology. They're using technology that we find obsolete today because that's what's available to them. And they live within the sites of Ascencia, the city of Ascencia, and its high walls and beautiful buildings and opulence. But, you know, they can't go near it. You know, there's a limit on how close you can even come, and they're only allowed 3-story buildings in Bethany. So this character is a detective, and he's a very good guy in a very dark place, and strives to bring justice to the world whenever possible. And he is called into Ascencia to help solve some crimes that even though we have the best detectives and the best investigators in the world in Ascencia, you know, after 150 years of living there, maybe they're not thinking out of the box, and this guy does. So they bring him in to help solve some crimes, and then in the process of solving those crimes, he develops some relationships in Ascencia with some people that have been there for a long time. One of them, her name is Carpenter, and she's basically like an ex-Mossad agent, and she is now one of the elite troops in Ascencia. Ascencia has its own, you know, standing army for defense, and again, they have technology that's so much better than anybody else in the world by law. You know, they're only allowed certain technologies there, but there's so much to get into. I can't even, I don't know where to start or end. I'm horrible at pitching this, but there's a lot of information. Nice. Where did you find those?
These are mine. They're my friend Jesse's.
Oh, very nice. Did I just buy them?
No, I gotta send them back to him.
Oh, what a jerk. Okay. Anyway,
Somebody asked, how does it feel to see your creation come out of your head onto the page?
really cool. Working with an incredible artist named Tony Parker. And he is, it's like he's in my mind sometimes. And I'll give him descriptions on what I'm looking for, and he'll surpass it every time. You know, they're very creative. I look forward to you guys seeing it. Again, there's two different worlds, right? There's Ascension and there's Bethany, and I had to almost have a completely different vibe for each.
We got a visitor,
All right,
so give it just a second.
sure. Guys, this is my good friend, brother, and bandmate, Shavo Odadjian. It's his birthday today.
What up?
So join me in congratulating him on his birthday. Happy birthday, Shavo.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you for having me on this amazing, beautiful day.
Yes, beautiful day today. Shav, the reason I wanted you to come on, aside from that it's your birthday and I want to say happy birthday,
Thank you,
is
sir.
that you are also a comic book collector and a comic book lover. And I wanted to have you talk about like what it was like for you as a kid to read comic books and what your interests were and, you know, some of your favorites.
Well, I don't remember exactly how it all started, but I remember my grandma moved away to like Burbank or something. And then there was a comic book store there right on her block called Passport Comics. Do you remember that?
That's where I used to buy my comics. Yeah,
Right on Victory.
Victory
So-
and Coldwater.
No. Clybourne. Like right there in Burbank, not Sherman Oaks. Anyways, so I'd walk there, that's why. And I'd have my allowance every week, and I'd grab my allowance and go there. So I started buying, so my first few comics were like I'd do New Mutants for some reason. I thought they were badass. Don't laugh at me, but you have before about Alpha Flight, the Canadian crew.
Well, I love Alpha Flight and New Mutants. Why would I laugh?
No, I don't know, because Alpha Flight's kind of known as cheesy right now. But
Well, they printed a lot of it.
What's
It's
that?
John Burns, so.
Yeah, well, I have 1 to 20, which means nothing nowadays in collecting. X-Men, but they were already up to like 200 something, I think 250, right at that time, like the 80s.
So it was probably the Jim Lee era of X-Men that you were reading, Shav.
Probably that's crazy. Coincidence. Then what else did I get? X Factor came out. I remember that, and I got the first few of those. Of course, Hulk. I don't know. I just dug it, man. It was just that it's like it's cool to go into a fantasy world. It's like nowadays the kids that have it on their TV, you know, they have it at the movies. They're watching all the movies now. They didn't have the movies as cool as they do now back then. So
they didn't have the technology, did they?
No, exactly. So it was all our imagination, looking at the pictures, and then kind of just like imagining exactly how it'd go. And it was cool. It was cool. And I love comics, just the way set and the way
So Shab, you're an artist. You've directed. You're an incredible songwriter. you
Thank
paint, you're prolific in that you do a lot of different things, and they're all artistic in nature. So in regards to comic books, what is it about superheroes that attracted you? Like, what was it that got you about superheroes?
Well, it's the ability to do things that you always, as a kid, wished you can do things, right? Like, I wish I could do this, or I wish I could do that. I wish I could make that thing come close to me from far away without me touching it. That's something I wished to do when I was a kid. I always wished to be invisible and walk around. That was something I wanted to be superpower, you know, like be strong and be able to lift cars, of course. So then when you read and these people are doing that, it kind of throws you in, kind of makes you a part of it, you know?
So I think it's interesting because a lot of comic books, you know, in the early days of comics were written by Jewish people. This is during World War II.
That's why they had all the Holocaust stuff.
When you had the Holocaust happening in Germany. And I always thought, like, part of the reason why I love superheroes is, one, they're doing it just for the good of humankind, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have no benefit to themselves. In fact, they put themselves at risk more often than not. And I feel like maybe in the back of some of these people's minds in the beginning when they were creating characters like Superman, it was just like, one, it was in defiance of the evil that was taking place at the time, and two,
which was the organization, yeah, of course.
Yeah, what was the Nazi Party and what was happening in Europe, you know, to Jews, ethnic, you know, minorities of all kinds, gypsies. A lot of people were being exterminated there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being Armenian, we know full well the impact of
what
that.
That's like, yeah.
Yeah, especially here in April, you know, we're coming on to 105 years of the Armenian genocide. So I'm wondering if they were just like so hopeless that they created these characters that were larger than life that could combat evil.
You think?
Can combat tyranny. And I'm wondering if a part of the reason why you love superheroes so much is because they can combat that evil in a way that no human being can.
Truth. You know what's funny is my kids, they're into the villains. I don't know what. They're always into the villains. They're always like, does this movie have a bad guy? That's always a question when I throw a new movie on. Does this movie, you know? And I never understood that, but it makes sense now. You know, it's the bad guys are more interesting sometimes. You know, nowadays.
Well, it's also the bad guys these days are more relatable in a lot of ways. Like, you couldn't relate to the bad guys when we were reading comics, you know. But now it's like they made Thanos almost an environmentalist. You know?
Yeah, bro.
It was almost like you could almost say he was doing good, whereas the original Thanos was killing people because he wanted to appease death, the personification of death, and he was in love with death, and that's why he was doing it. They went a completely different route for the Avengers movies, but you know, I can understand why they're more likable because they're not evil for the sake of being evil. They're evil for the sake of doing some good in a way, you know.
But also, sorry to interrupt. When you have that, especially as grand of the Avengers and grand movies like that, you can't show that bad of evil. It's, you know what I mean? It has to be somewhat acceptable. So then they turn really bad guys into somewhat bad guys that portray the other side. The other side doesn't. I haven't seen anything really dark and evil on these movies recently. The new ones, you know.
Well,
but it's cool because kids watch them, huh?
It bumps people out. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like they don't want to think of anything as purely, truly evil.
Evil, yeah.
And I think that in some ways that's realistic because really everybody has a little good and evil in them, right, Shavo?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's good and bad points to every single human being out there, and sometimes you start making choices, and those choices lead you down a path you don't want to be down, and then you don't know how to reverse that.
Mm-hmm. Which is a lot of comic book stuff. Stories start from the origins.
Yeah, like Spider-Man's origin is pretty bad, right? Like he got his uncle killed essentially.
Yeah, bro.
Just because he didn't feel like stopping somebody that was stealing something. You know, so he paid the price for that his whole life.
That is dark. That is dark.
Very dark.
Anytime we watch that, the kids get teary-eyed still. That one part, you know.
Well, yeah, especially the actor portraying Uncle Ben is a very likable actor and charismatic, and you feel for him. He feels like he's your uncle. You know, and then you have Batman whose parents are killed for no reason.
No reason.
You know.
Hey, let me ask you a question. What did you think of the Joker?
I like the Joker, although I don't look at it as a purely comic book movie. It was more
psychological shit.
Yeah, it was more like just a normal film than a comic book movie because it actually made the Joker too human for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's an element of the
Never-
Joker when you're reading like Killing Joke, you know, or you know, Neil Adams era Joker, or even newer Joker. He's so maniacal, even though he doesn't have superpowers. You feel like he's got superpowers. That just looked like a skinny nerd who, you know, who was kicked around a lot, who ended up killing somebody. I don't know if there's too much of a distinction between that character and just a normal psychopath who murders people, except that he kind of developed a cult following very quickly.
Yeah,
and I think that's where they were going with it.
Yeah.
So I did like the film. Of course, the acting was superb.
Very good.
But I don't look at it as a comic book film per se.
Agreed. And it was crazy because when I went and saw it, halfway through, I was like, man, I hope there's no kids watching this. And I looked to my left, and there's like a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, like this, you know?
Yeah,
So,
it's you know what though? I watched movies when I was 8, 7, 8, 9, and I probably wouldn't want my kids watching those movies now. But the reality is, kids are gonna be okay. You know, like they'll be all right.
I know it trips me out though sometimes because we have kids now. You know, before I would have never had that thought. I would have never been watching the Joker and going, well, I hope kids are not watching this. Doesn't say,
Yeah.
you know?
Well,
But
you
now
have an
that we're-
awareness now that you didn't have before. Shab, what are your plans for your birthday today, man? I know you can't really go anywhere, but
Stay home and be home. Be safe. From this
so it's the best birthday possible. You get to spend it with your family.
I'm cool because my family, yeah, man. I woke up, the kids are around me. My daughter wakes up and she's starting to speak now, and she said, "Happy papa, papa." You know, just she says the syllables with the correct first sentence. You know, I mean that first letter of the first word.
Shab, I know you have a project that you're releasing soon.
Yeah,
North Kingsley.
North Kingsley. We were gonna drop it today, bro.
Well, can we talk a little bit about that? Tell me about your process.
Sure, man. It started like a year and a half ago. It was with 2 guys I met at a friend's studio. And they were one of the guys, Sorrow. He was so great at like the logic and all the
programming and
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I had him come over to my studio and teach me how to do logic. You know, how to run logic, because I was on Pro Tools for all my life. And as I'm learning, we developed, you know, on one of the songs that we were like practicing to make, we made a great track. And I was like, dude, this is really cool. So he sat and then he did it real quick. And then I thought of something else. We did another one real quick. I go, hey, we got something here. So that was a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And we kind of developed, and then Ray came in and he did vocals. Originally, it was just going to be me doing music, just instrumentals, and then having like friends like Serge and Jonathan Davis and like some of the rapper friends like Be Real and all these, just do vocals on it and be like a best of thing, you know? Like
compilation.
Vocals and us, you know? And then when Ray came through, I was like, man, this guy's got a lot of great words. And maybe we should do this, you know, for real, as a group, as a unit, not just a project. And so it developed, bro. It developed, and now it's at a point where we have 12 songs ready to go. We were going to drop it as a record, but I decided I'm going to market it differently, and I'm going to drop it as like pieces of a record throughout the year. So like 3 songs will come out May 22nd. I set the date to the day our show is going to be. May 22nd. It's also the 22. First 3 songs with 3 videos, and then we'll do 3 more every 3 months, like kind of like trilogies.
Yeah.
For a whole year. So we'll release 3 songs every 4 months, something like that. And
well, Shab, maybe we'll have you on once it's out. If you could do like a limited release of albums, we'll make them available for people to purchase here.
I would love that. We'll do that there first if you want. I'm cool with that.
All right, man. Well, Shab, thank you very much for being a part of this, and congratulations on your birthday. Love you, brother. Hope to see you soon, man. Give you a big hug virtually. And thank you for all our fans. And hey, let's do this again sometime. This was a lot of fun.
Hell yeah.
And again, thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, brother. Have a good one. Bye.
Later, Shab.
Later, brother.
We're about 5 minutes.
What do you mean we got 5 minutes?
We got about 5. Well, this only goes for an hour, and then it's.
I just did my outro. We're done.
Oh.
Last question.
One last question, guys. There's still. It takes a minute.
People got to type.
Oh, somebody's just saying, when's the next stream, John?
I don't know. If you guys enjoyed this, maybe we'll do another one. And we'll get some special guests every now and then. I can talk in more detail about Ascencia So just send in your questions, and maybe we'll do another one in a week or two. All right, guys. Thank you.